I was just asked a shaila about autopsy. Actually, it came from Steffi as Leslie. I guess it was one of the questions, so we'll just have a quick word on autopsies in Judaism. So there's a biblical prohibition of nivul hames. There's a prohibition of desecrating, destroying the body. That we know people are familiar with kavod hames. People are familiar with giving honor to the dead. Unfortunately, many aren't so familiar with kavod achayim, honor to the living. It's more kavod achai is more important than kavod hames. But many people they don't give the person any kavod when they're living, or but they all of a sudden when the person's dead. So I'm not saying you should. There is kavod hames, but it has to be kavod achai also. So one of the halachas is we're very careful about burying the person right away. Unless the family's not there, then we postpone the burial until the family gets there within reason. So we do everything with kavod hames. So one of the things prohibited is to destroy the body of the mace. So it could be that in the not too distant future, an autopsy might not involve any type of desecration. There's nothing, in theory we have no problem with an autopsy. It's like in theory we have no problem with a Kohen being in medical school. It's not the medical school that's the problem, it's the fact that you come in contact with the dead body. That's the problem. So if we go with virtual medical school, so then it wouldn't be an issue for a Kohen. Similarly here, it's not an autopsy per se that's the problem, it's the fact that you have to cut up the body in order to do the... So now they already have some things, like a camera that's a little better, but still, at this point, it's still a problem. So, and therefore, all things being equal, we assume an autopsy is prohibited in Jewish law. However, like all rules, there are some exceptions to the rule. There are two major exceptions to the rule of autopsies. One is let's say someone is murdered, and we know who did it. The problem is, but the only way you can prove it in a court of law is by doing an autopsy. So if you say you don't do an autopsy, the murderer is going to walk scot-free. What kind of kavod hames is that? So we assume it's a bigger kavod hames if the only way to besides the fact he can we don't want this guy going around killing more people. So that's a factor as well. But independent of that as well, what kind of kavod? The only reason we don't do an autopsy is kavod hames. This would be a big degradation to the mace. You're letting the person who murdered them go free, so then you're permitted to do an autopsy if it gets the person to put the person behind bars. A second exception to the rule is there was a movie many years ago, Outbreak. I think it was Dustin Hoffman and Rene Russo maybe. But basically the movie was that it was basically this guy came back from, I don't know, somewhere in Africa, I guess, and he came back with a monkey, and the monkey spread this disease, and basically everyone was getting sick, and the guards had to come all over and lock up the town and separate everyone. So let's say the kind of outbreak, someone walks in infectious disease, as we have them today also. Someone walks into a hospital, they have an infectious disease, the doctors have no clue, the person dies. And then 5 minutes later, someone with the same symptoms and walks in. So the halacha is, to know the Yehuda writes, you're allowed to, we don't believe you can't do an autopsy for the sake of general science, because we assume the body is going to be mistreated and it's not necessarily used as they tell you. But if there's what the knows the Yehuda writes, if you need a mace meal of fun of, if you have a dead person in front of you, so that's considered, then you're permitted to do an autopsy. In other words, in that case, if someone walks in 5 minutes later, then you're allowed to do an autopsy to save the other person's life. And in fact, the people extended, know the Yehuda lived during his time. Today, with modern technology, doesn't this have to be in the same hospital? It doesn't have to be in the same city. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same country. I mean, someone could be dying in New York, but in Israel they have this person today. Whatever, is a discussion among the poskim how liberal we want to be in the definition of a dead person in front of you, but today with technology that changes everything, and therefore the point being is, if you could save someone immediately, someone, it doesn't, they could be in different towns, but if you have all the information on the computer from doing the autopsy that could save the person, that's considered a chol milofanav, and therefore you can do an autopsy. So the whole concept of not doing an autopsy is kavod hameis, and the two major exceptions are, it's a bigger kavod hameis to do an autopsy. Either number one, letting the murderer go will be a bizayin hameis, will be a mockery. This person's dead and this person's walking around, living a normal life, and he should be behind jails or capital punishment, whatever the case may be. And in this case, it's pikuach nefesh. If you have what greater mitzvah than to save someone else's life? So if you could do an autopsy, do the nivul hameis, and go ahead and save someone's life, so we assume that's the biggest cover for someone, that I could do a chesed. Even we do chesed when we're alive, but we can even do a chesed when we're dead. And one person, and here it's just cutting the body. We even go. It's a separate discussion we're not going into now, but that's why by organ transplants, it's a similar issue in terms of what type of transplants can you do, what you can. Today, it's a different child than it was 20, 30 years ago because the technology is much better and we could do it. But that's also part of the issue of taking an organ from one person and putting it in. Here you're taking it and you're not even going to bury it. It's going to be part of the other person, as opposed to at least nivul hameis, you still, whatever's left, you're going to take the rest of the body. But in terms of organ transplants as well, again, that's a separate chair in terms of the details, but as well taking an organ that could be used and saving someone's life, or helping out a living person. Said also there's room as well. We don't believe in this randomly signing the back of our license plates and donating our limbs for the sake of general science. However, there are different groups now, but we are, in principle, under rabbinic supervision, believe that there are many times today where an organ transplant could be a tremendous mitzvah. And certainly, even if I'm not talking about an organ transplant, but something which you're going to get giving blood or a bone, different things that you're not losing anything, meaning permanently, things are going to grow back. Perhaps it's even closer to even an obligation to do things that don't cause that much harm, and you're not losing anything. To donate an organ, you never would be obligated to, because that's something you have to give up, whether it's one kidney. But it could be but it could be a midas chasidus. In fact, it probably is. In fact, a friend of mine, actually, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, the one who was here in Machavrus in YU, now he's out in Eretz Yisrael, he donated an organ to actually a stranger. I didn't even know about it when I was speaking to him a couple months later. He told me about it. So again, to donate organs is you have to be a special person, because you don't know if the body's even going to accept it. So therefore, you have to be willing that if they throw it out in the garbage, you still feel good about yourself. You can't. Oh, I can't believe it. I only have one kidney, and it's now in the. You have to say, well, I did the right thing. That's what God wanted. So there's many things that go into, besides all the halachic parts, the psychological issues. So we'll have to continue at this point.